Hello guys! Welcome back to Not Just Mecha. It's Marco here, and today we talk about books that will instantly level up your painting game. Well, after reading them. Yeah. In the first video of this mini-series, I showed you my ongoing collection of books that I use for inspiration and references. The rule to end up on that shelf is the fewer words, the better. And a bunch of big, cool pictures is all I need to spark creativity and see in a single overdose of information how the infinite number of little choices the artists make during the process coalesces in a final artwork. You can get a lot from studying a painting or an illustration, especially if you are looking for a high-voltage jumpstart of the artistic side of the brain. But to be able to really see, dissect, and fully understand at a conscious level all that overlapped information, not to mention use it in a practical way, or even better, to create something completely new, intuition may not be enough, especially if, like me, you are not artistically inclined by nature. Luckily, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because, as you can imagine, there are a ton of books about art and painting out there. But we are standing on the shoulders of so many giants that it's often difficult to simply choose where to begin. So this video wants to help you start your personal collection with tested, super effective titles. And if you have more suggestions for the community and me, because I'm always looking for new books, please let me know in the comments. I planned this video as an escalation of depth, complexity and practical utility. But I want to start with a book that doesn't really belong to any chart, and that I absolutely love. Through the eyes of a graphic designer, Chromorama brings you deep into the technical, social and cultural history of color, showing how our relation and perception of colors has drastically evolved through time, from the first cave paintings to the Industrial Revolution and its mass-produced goods, and the digital age. At a first glance, there is nothing immediately usable while painting, especially miniatures. But let it sink in your brain, and you'll soon start thinking about colors in a totally different way. Plus, it's a super fun reading experience by itself. Chromorama recently got an English translation, so grab it without a second thought, and you can thank me later. In the second place of my chart, I have Figopedia by Jérémie Bonamant. That, strangely enough, it's the only book in my collection specifically about miniature painting. This could be a bit controversial, but I believe that to turn this strange thing we do more and more into a proper art, we need to move outside our often self-referential niche, even in terms of learning and teaching. Don't get me wrong, there are great publications out there, especially for beginners and intermediate painters. But as you'll see, for my personal growth, I chose to look outside, to the wider landscape of art, in the broadest possible sense of the word. That said, this book stands proud on my shelf, because it's the perfect springboard to jump to the other side and start thinking as a painter, not only a miniature painter. This is a book clearly written by someone with a deep aesthetic and technical understanding of painting in general, and able to simplify and condense the most different and complex lessons in a format immediately usable by a miniature painter, no matter what level or subtype of painting is doing. And this is the major inspiration for my own workshops and classes. This publication has been around for ages, and because of the crazy power-up of skills our community made in the last few years, some of the paint jobs may look dated, but you have my guarantee, the information is still pure gold. to follow the flow of the discussion, and to further corroborate the idea that painting is painting, no matter the medium or canvas used. Here is a super fun reading and a treat for your eyes at the same time, because it's also a beautiful book to browse. The title, Urban Watercolor Sketching, suggests a topic way too specific to become useful for us. But I could literally copy-paste the review and the table of contents of Figopedia and use it to describe this book. It talks about color theory, the cultural and visual nature of the single colors, values, and how they create light, shadows, and volume, color harmonies, actual color mixing, and practical techniques like glazes and washes. Yeah, we didn't invent anything. And these delivered in a simple and fun style that makes absorbing an absurd amount of useful concepts extremely easy and pleasant. The next step of this ascending staircase must necessarily be Color and Light by James Gurney, because this book seems written for us, and it touches every meaningful, major and minor aspect of using colors with a brush. Every page spread touches a new topic, so the explanations are brief and essential, but the key points are all there, condensed in a tight package ready to be used. Because of the crazy amount of talking points and the generalist format, and not for shortcomings of the author, the content is treated here and there in a superficial way, without ever going too deep. That's not necessarily a bad thing, to avoid getting lost in too much information at the beginning of your journey. But it's still a mind-blowing experience for the average miniature painter, and a great bullet point list of things to keep in mind while painting. And as a deformation of this idea, I'm currently using it as an actual table of contents for an imaginary encyclopedia, where every chapter corresponds to a new research, or a pile of new books on that more specific topic. So, for the sheer amount of subjects and the infinite doors it can open during your whole painting journey, I consider this one a must to have on the shelf. I bought Color and Light years ago in tandem with Imaginative Realism, and I immediately felt this one as way less useful. Mostly because, still being a generalist overview on painting, it goes more in depth into the preliminary stages of drawing, modeling volumes in 2D, and composition. Depending on your background, this could be considered as a prequel, because chronologically the techniques and the topics treated are mostly applied before the stage of actually slapping paint around. Or a sequel, because everything is a tiny bit more complex and abstract, and often to be adapted and fixed in the next phases. But the point is that these days I'm checking this one a bit more than Color and Light, and I take it as a sign that one pack of lessons is learned and absorbed, and there's still more that I need to rationalize from here. So the perception on this one is a bit more relative to your experience, compared to the objective usefulness of the previous ones. At this point, the jump into the other side of the mirror is done, and we are in full 2D artworks territory, almost ready for an extra jump into professional realms that consider more basic concepts internalized and completely under your skin. Reorganizing the collection in a scale of growing complexity, we land on Art Fundamentals by 3D Total Publishing and multiple authors. Sadly, I didn't discover and read these books in this precise order, and because of the increasing depth of the technical exploration, aimed to a clearly more prepared target audience, I got lost on the road, and for a couple of years I stuck to the first couple of chapters. Extremely useful and well written, but in my perception at the time, not worthy of the price of the full thing. But as soon as I fixed my more fundamental fundamentals, this has become the cornerstone of an holistic vision on painting that basically gave me the actual instruments and mindset to be able to absorb ideas, techniques, and visual stuff in general from any source. This journey can be summarized incredibly well by my relation with these last chapters about human anatomy, that at the beginning felt like an unusable overkill. Then they became not enough, leading to other more specific books like this one. Not many words here, but still, it falls for sure into the didactic, academic category. I cannot show you every page, because YouTube is quite bigoted about the human body, even in this context, but these should give you the idea of how it works. In every page, you get high-quality reference pictures of every part of the human body, both male and female, and in different ages and body types. Then rendered as muscle structure under the skin, outlines for pure drawers, and for painters, super useful geometric planes. This is what I see when I plan a model or a workflow, and this is what I'm looking for when sketching, or in the early stages of a grisaille. If you have seen my videos, you know how much emphasis I put on this stage, and based on that, you can understand how useful I consider this book. And the next level of this subchapter is made by super classic books about pure drawing. It may seem like a step back, because we go quote-unquote back in the process to simple black and white pencil drawing. But for me it's actually a huge step forward, because of the level of abstraction involved in the process. Having the geometric planes of the body clearly spelled out is a great visual aid that works amazingly well with our little 3D canvases, because we have the actual planes in the sculpt. So the translation is flawless and immediate. But if I'm able to visualize and render that information in the vacuum of a flat, blank page, it means that when I am on a model, I can really do crazy shit and manipulate light and the different planes it creates in total freedom. Back on track with Beyond Art Fundamentals, that, as the not-so-cryptic title points out, comes after Art Fundamentals. This is another one that I got too soon, so it's a bit difficult to pinpoint its actual value. The subtitle explains that this is about emotion, mood, and storytelling. And if you know me, you know that my production is totally, 100%, all about precisely this. When I read it, it was a bit too advanced, and a bit too focused on the 2D medium, but it planted the seeds of good, fundamental ideas. And when I was actually ready for the book, those ideas had already bloomed and grown a bit beyond this content. I joked about the title, but I cannot imagine a better label for this book. And in hindsight, I can finally tell that it's a good step forward. Again, with the solid ground of all the previous stuff, sustaining this kind of reasoning on and application of storytelling. Time for a quick detour from the macro universe of general painting to the micro universe of oil painting. That's a bit strange to define micro, since it's a huge topic by itself. Here I don't have a proper escalation of complexity, because thanks to a few good teachers, I arrived at the books with a good understanding of the basic practical process, and kind of already optimized for miniature painting. So my investigation of oils in book format starts in 5th gear. Patrick Jones is one of my favorite contemporary fantasy painters, and the convergence of subject, style, and techniques makes this the absolute perfect storm. Oil painting techniques gives you more direct, practical information that then you can use to better understand oil painting masterclass, and still, reading between the lines, even more stuff. Oil paints are used in an infinite variety of different ways, but beginner books tend to focus on simple, thick, alla prima painting that doesn't work extremely well for us. So I'm still in search for a good starting point to suggest. I'll keep you updated on this front. I wasn't completely sure about adding this one to the list, but I don't want to keep any secrets from you. This is not an easy one, but I need it as a new turning point. The junction that turns into teaching about painting. Verbose as only a technical handbook from 100 years ago can be, and with no colored visual aids, even when talking about specific colors and mixes. Inside you can find some nice practical information for every level of oil painter, but you have to dig. And it requires a good dose of abstraction, and why not a few practical tests. Despite all, it's an amazing read if you find yourself in the position of teaching about oil painting, and in need of an expert overview on the subject, to make the crazy spectrum of possibilities more methodical and coherent. Still, be ready to use a good amount of force of will to get to the end. And talking about books for teachers and students that want to give a look behind the scenes of teaching, I feel that this one is the most amazing jewel of that crown. Josef Albers taught at the Bauhaus in the 20s and at Yale's Department of Design, and he is considered one of the most influential teachers of visual arts of the last century. He defines the book as a record of an experimental way of studying color and teaching color. And if this sounds very scientific and dry, well, that's because everything in this book is on purpose very scientific and dry. The content is clearly aimed to design, graphic or industrial, or even marketing goals. So the accent on detached objectivity and cultural-based perception is there to turn colors and harmonies into effective, repeatable, commercial formulas. And even if this point of view can be terrifying for a purer artistic soul, I see it as a crazily powerful set of tools to have at disposal when painting. Company styles, like the Games Workshop look, for example, definitely fell more into these calculated mathematics of colors and industrial design reasoning more than anything else. And we close with a peek of disenchanted, objective, mathematical, ready-to-use stuff. A bunch of color mixing recipes. The titles here say everything. My disclaimer on these books is that, unlike the others, that mostly will have an increasing utility during your painting journey, these books are the avatar of the concept of diminishing returns. With experience, you'll use them less and less and less. But if you are just starting diving into color mixing and advanced painting, they will be honestly a crazy boost to your understanding of color mixing and the behavior of colors in general. And this connects like a perfect circular narrative with my rant at the beginning of the video. Proper teaching and learning, or simply becoming more efficient at sharing information about painting, become a real thing only if our community starts speaking the common, standardized language of the rest of the artistic world. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts and feedback on these books and how they changed or improved your work, because I'm totally sure they will make an impact. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Remember that you can ask me anything down below with a comment, and you can follow my projects during the week using one of my socials. And if you want to support my work, check my Patreon page and join the community, or maybe ask for a commission. See you next week, guys! Madonna, che bello che è sto libro. Adesso lo leggo.